Today, I'd like to get a response and question from the students as many as possible. I'd like to have two sections today. First section is to have some question and answer about his special lecture today, also giving back. And in the later part, I'd like to receive any question that you want to ask, including like a challenge and animation or challenge and so who will be the first? And please, you just give your name and affiliation, and the question hopefully by 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Hannah Mira from Tokyo University. Thank you for your presentation today. I would like to ask one thing. You addressed at the first United Nations headquarters that you will be a bridge builder. That you would like to be a bridge builder. A bridge builder.
A bridge builder.
I'm sorry. And as you mentioned in today's speech, you said the conflicts are getting more and more complex. In that regarding that, how do you think the United Nations can overcome the challenges of having such a complex issues?
Well, what we are seeing is that the conflicts are becoming more complicated. If you look at Central African Republic, just to give an example, you have the government, and you have 14 armed groups, and then you have political parties. And the problem is how to bring people together. Usually a bridge is between two sides of the river. Now we have to build a bridge between 15 sides of it, so it's becoming more and more complex. And that is why it is important to act in relation to those that have an influence on the parties to the conflict. But look at Syria today. In Syria you have all the groups fighting there, but you have the influence of Russia, of Turkey, of Iran, of the United States, of Saudi Arabia. So more and more we need to act convincing those that have an influence to the parties of the conflict that these wars now are wars nobody is winning, everybody is losing, that it is better for them to come together and to create conditions for peace than to go on supporting a conflict that became, because of terrorism, a threat for everyone. But this looks logic, but it's still very difficult to convince, especially those that still think they can win the war. The truth is that when I was studying history, with your age, I used to study history, and usually when there was a war, there was a winner. Now we have more and more wars in which all of the parties are losers. And so it's kind of a paradox. It should be easy to make peace as everybody is losing, but it's becoming more and more difficult because of the complexity of the conflicts, the multiplication of the actors, and the unpredictability of the situation, and the lack of leverage to put pressure on them.
Thank you very much. Is it okay to receive 2 or 3 questions of basket? Yes? Could be, yes? Yes. Do you have a mic? Yes.
Can you give your mic?
My name is and thank you for giving us a wonderful speech, and it's my pleasure to join this opportunity. I would like to ask you about the nuclear issue, since you mentioned that this issue is the most priority among the 7 threats that we are facing now. So, what is your personal opinion about the series of sanctions that UN and other countries imposed against North Korea right now? Do you think these sanctions are working well to prevent their nuclear test for deterrent?
Thank you very much. And maybe another gentleman here?
Hello, my name is Azuki. I'm from Tokyo University for Studies and Question, and I'm very inspired and inspired speech. Thank you so much. And actually, Ireland implementing action is very important for preventing the tragedies that's occurring in the world. And then I think many countries understand the gravity of the issues. But my question is, how do you try to allow each country to find a common ground and help them make their understanding into the action? How do you help them to so that they can put their understanding understanding the action at a country level, with all countries having an interest and importance, which is different. That's my question. Thank you, sir.
I think it is clear in relation to North Korea that it is not acceptable to have against the Security Council decisions North Korea becoming a nuclear state. It is clear. It is clear it's not acceptable. And so the Security Council has been united in not only implementing a number of resolutions, in approving a number of resolutions, but in defining a number of sanctions whose objective is to force North Korea to accept that they need to denuclearize. The information we have is that these sanctions are becoming to have some impact, and that impact might indeed lead to a change in attitude of the North Koreans. My belief is that the unity of the Security Council is essential to preserve that unity, and that unity both is relevant to make the sanctions work, but also to create the opportunity for a diplomatic engagement that would allow for the denuclearization of the peninsula to be obtained by peaceful means and not by a war whose consequences could be dramatically devastating. How to find common ground? That is what I would like to know in many circumstances. I mean, it's my deep belief that in most of the conflicts that we have today, the contradictory interests that exist are much smaller than the common interest to really establish peace and benefit from it. But it's not easy to convince parties of that, and more you are having irrational parties. For instance, all these groups based on fundamentalist ideas and things of the sort, it's very difficult to find common ground with them. So we are having a serious problem in solving conflicts, and that is why prevention is so important. Because if we act very early, you might be able to stop it. If you let things go on and on and on, then it's becoming sometimes practically impossible to stop it. And you see conflicts that are lasting now for decades and decades and decades. And it's stupid because nobody's benefiting, but they keep on and on and on thinking with the illusion that they might be able to win.
Okay, next questions? So, lady.
You mentioned the feeling of isolated in the part of multiplication of conflict, and I believe that it is very important to provide mental support to not only to terrorists but also ex-combatants or other people. But the problem is the difficult is to measure the efficacy quantitatively. So my question is how do we address this mental problem in the limited budget and limited time frame? Thank you. Problem to mental support and mental problem.
Well, first of all, you need to prevent radicalization. That is one very important dimension. Okay, and unfortunately, we have many societies in which there are. It's easy to radicalize, no, because there is the negative impact of many aspects. So we need to have a strategy to prevent radicalization. And then programs of integration. But those programs of integration need indeed to have different components. You need to have training and find jobs and create conditions for them to integrate in society. But you need to also look into levels of trauma that exist. And so mental health is a very important dimension that is usually neglected. I don't know what happens in Japan, but in my country, lots of people with a little bit of problem go to the psychiatrist to find a solution or whatever. And with very little problems. Can you imagine what it is for someone that has lived in a war environment for years, the level of trauma involved? They really need psychological and psychiatric support. And unfortunately, in many of the countries where we are operating, that support is not available. Look at Central African Republic or the DRC. So it is one of the gaps that we have today, is the possibility to give psychosocial support to the victims of trauma, women, victims of rape, and to ex-combatants and others. It is a gap that needs to be filled, and it's not easy to fill the gap because there's not enough expertise and resources there.
Thank you. So maybe the lady over there? Yes. Could you pass the mic? Because Sophia University is recording, if you can close to the mic.
Speak.
Thank you for your lecture today. I'm Yu Kaneko from Sophia University, and I understand that you want to promote sustainable development goals. And today you talked about human security and sustainable development all over the world. Sustainable development goals. And can you tell us how human security approach contribute to the realization of SDGs? And in addition to that, what do you want us, the young generations, to do to promote human security for the realization of SDGs?
Well, many of the sustainable development goals are directly linked to human security. If you eradicate poverty, you are dealing with human security. If you have health services that provide adequate health coverage, you are dealing with human security. If you boost education, you are dealing with human security. Then, of course, there are some elements that are less directly linked to it, but even environment, climate, is linked to human security. You see what happened tragically in the Caribbean. So there is a very strong link, and the advantage of human security is it can be a unifying concept. You can use it to unify strategies of prevention, of sustainable development, of sustaining peace, of mediation. I mean, and it is a concept that nobody can easily be against. Responsibility to protect, lots of states are against. Even today, if you talk about sustaining peace, some countries start to doubt whether what the objective is not to have interference in the internal affairs of the country. Human security, I never heard anybody complaining, which means it's a very useful tool to rationalize policies and to bring together different objectives. When you have, and this is the clear dimension of the Agenda 2030, is that it's inclusive and it's comprehensive. It's not just one thing or another, it's to put everything together. And human security is exactly that. You put everything together in one single concept.
Somebody who are not from Sofia or not from Tokyo? Yes.
October 13th this year. And in this proposal, you propose to establish a Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs and Department of Peace Operations, so that the United Nations can enhance the effectiveness of the peace and security pillar by reducing the fragmentation of each institution. And I have a question about the peacekeeping missions. The PKO has changed since its rebirth, and its mandates also has been expanded, like the peace protection of civilians, and also they have become more robust under the Chapter 7 mandates. And but the basic principles of PKO, they are consent and impartiality and non-use of force except in the self-defense, are still relevant. But the reality, is that my question is that possible for the United Nations to possess these principles at the same time to keep their mandates in the real situation?
What it demonstrates is that peacekeeping is very important, but peacekeeping is not the only instrument we need. We need situations in which we need peace enforcing, we need counter-terrorism operations on the ground. The problem is that the UN, the blue helmets, cannot do it. That is why I've been very strongly in favor of having partners, namely the African Union, with African Union forces, with a Chapter 7 mandate to do peace enforcing, which means, as one African head of state was telling me recently, to be able to go after the bad guys, which of course is a simplified way to describe, but to be able to impose peace and to fight terrorism, but with a different kind of mandate. And these, of course, cannot be done by peacekeepers. In some situations, you can have both. You can have a peacekeeping operation to do protection of civilians, but you need to have that other force. It's the case of the G5 Sahel that we have recently approved for Mali and the countries around Mali. So it's clear that peacekeeping has a role to play, but it's not the only kind of operation we need. We need peace enforcing, we need counter-terrorism operations, but they cannot be done by blue helmets. They abide by other rules, but they should have strong mandates, predictable funding, and mechanisms of control of human rights violations and things of the sort to make sure that they abide by the principles of the United Nations.
I received every question now. Okay. So, maybe, sorry.
Well, my name is Sayuri Naito, and I'm from Kansegaku University. And thank you very much for the inspiring presentation speech today. My question is about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. And the motto of SDGs is to leave no one behind. And to do that, to achieve that, coordination among different actors is very important. And my question is, as a Secretary General, which actor has the biggest role to play in the future? And how UN is thinking to cooperate with this actor to achieve SDGs?
I don't think there is any actor that is a decisive role. I think the main idea of the Sustainable Development Goals is that you need to bring everybody together. You need governments, you need the private sector. There is no way to do everything without private investment. The bulk of it will have to be done by private investment. You need the academia, you need the civil society, and within the UN you need all agencies working together in an effective and coordinated way, and that's one of the reasons why we are proposing the reforms we are proposing, because the UN is still very fragmented, as you probably have heard about. So the Sustainable Development Goals require a comprehensive approach to bring all actors together, because if not, it will fail. One actor alone will fail.
Thank you very much.
Maybe over there.
My name is Asuka Koyama and I'm from Chuo University. Thanks for your speech. And my question is some kind of a bit more practical than other students do, but I'm interested in the goal you mentioned about the prevention of issues, and I think the important thing is make conversation, make interaction, and make effort involving everyone. But in our society, some kind of groups of people really don't want to engage in our conversation. They claim their hate or feeling of refusal. What we have to make effort. So we can, what do you think about how we can improve our situation?
Improve the prevention, right?
Yeah.
Well, there are several levels of prevention. First, there are general levels. To have sustainable inclusive development is a way to prevent. No? If people have jobs, if people have opportunities in life, it's not easy to radicalize them. If you have young people unemployed in Tunisia, let's give an example of a country, 40% of young people unemployed, it's very easy for radical groups to mobilize them. So, I mean, development is in itself a prevention tool. Then you have to act in relation to the potential conflicts in a society. For instance, there are conflicts between farmers and herders. In Africa, this is a typical thing. You need to act with the tribal leaders, you need to act with the governments in order to make sure that these contradictions are overcome. For instance, if there's a competition for water, that there are investments in order to have enough water to be able to serve both the interests of both communities. And then you have the conflicts themselves that can be prevented by mediation. You have two leaders that want to, now it's very common in elections. No? After the election, both say they have won. No? So you need to do effective mediation before they start really mobilizing militias or whatever to fight. You need to find solutions. Sometimes you give one president and the other prime minister, or you make sure that there is a government of national unity or whatever. So there are different levels of prevention, and you need to act at all those levels of prevention. More, I would say, general prevention and more specific prevention of conflicts.
Next.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Yuka Nakashima. And I have a question about movement of people.
About, sorry?
Movement of people. Yeah. And when thinking about human security and national security balance, it's kind of difficult for us, Japan, to act to protect refugees. But what do you expect for us to act as for us Japanese to act to protect refugees?
Well, first of all, Japan is supporting and can support refugee programs around the world and support the countries that are hosting refugees. I remember in Jordan, I went to visit Jordan with your former Minister of Foreign Affairs. There was a very important program of support of Japan to Jordan to allow for human security of refugees in Jordan. On the other hand, when I was High Commissioner, there was also an approval by the Japanese government of a rather small, but in any case meaningful by its symbolic value, program of resettlement of Japanese in Japan, coming from Myanmar, and I think a few are now coming from Syria. So there are things of this sort that can be done by Japan as by any other country. Of course, Japan is an island, so you don't have refugees coming to your borders easily, but those that have refugees coming to the borders need to have, of course, borders need to be protected, but the refugees also need to be protected. So you need to have a protection-sensitive management of the borders for those that are in need of protection to be able to get that protection. Unfortunately, some countries, as you know, have closed their borders in total disregard for international refugee law.
Thank you. Okay. So that's, yes.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I'm Koji Endo. I'm Koji Endo from Kyoto University. My interest is about political and economic background. So I was researching in Nepal about humanitarian actions after Nepal earthquake 2015, and then so I frequently encountered obstacles. So based on obstacles about humanitarian actions based on political background or economic matters, and then to ensure human security. So UN itself should be changed from post-World War II system, such as veto, something like that. And then my question is, how do you think about changing UN post-World War II system to UN post-World War II system, governing system such as veto to ensure human security? So against political and economic.
There are several dimensions on this. One, the UN institutions, and namely the Security Council, still reflect the post-World War II situation, which means they don't reflect today's situation. Japan is very strongly interested in the reform of the Security Council. Unfortunately, until now, very little has been done to make it possible. But it would be very good to have a Security Council more reflecting the reality of today, which means larger, with a better legitimacy and more effective way to work. On the other hand, you need to make sure that you have in the UN departments and in the UN agencies rules that allow for effective management. That's why I'm trying to do the reforms I'm trying to do, for coordination and for accountability, which means to measure the results of what one does and to feel and to determine who's responsible for what, and for, if people do not deliver, to make sure that that is also consistently noted. So we need at political level, but we also need at managerial level and at practical level a much more effective way to address the crisis we face.
I have a question. Thank you.
I have a question about SDGs. And I joined high-level political forum over the sustainable development this year, and I still sound like SDGs are not very effective to prevent wars or conflicts. So how do you think, what is the SDGs limitation and how we can solve it?
Well, the Sustainable Development Goals have a problem. It is a very comprehensive program. It's very difficult to explain it to everybody. Before we had the Millennium Development Goals, 8 things, very simple. Of course, development is in itself complex. So there was an attempt to really have a comprehensive and inclusive approach to development, but we came with something that's not easy to explain. And the problem with the high-level political forum, in my opinion, is that it is very compact. So each country comes, they make a report about what they do, but there is not time for an effective discussion. I think the model needs to be improved in order to have an effective discussion and to make things more attractive and give a bigger impulse to the practical implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We are still not yet there. One thing, that's the only thing I ask you. be full citizens. Fully assume your responsibility as citizens, which means get engaged in the political life of your country, get engaged in the civil society and the different causes in line with your beliefs, and be cosmopolitan. Don't look only about Japan. Look at the whole world, because we are all interlinked now. And Japan, even if you have some beautiful islands and can benefit from that fact, the prosperity and the well-being of the Japanese will depend a lot on how the world will be moving. So be full citizens of Japan and full cosmopolitan citizens of the world.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General, to give us such a historical and very special event for us. If you allow me to, it could be great if I can pass my book, which I just published, emphasize importance of inclusive process in rebuilding or in making a successful peace building. So thank you very much for everybody, and we really appreciate your participations and active questions. And I think we never forget the kindness and the response and the commitment of you. Thank you so much.
3, 2, 1, smile. 3, 2, 1, smile. Big smile, please. 3, 2, 1. One more. 3, 2, 1, smile. Thank you.